parties are obliged, first of all, to take position vis-à-vis the economic crisis, and they can't just ignore it. And this has triggered a variety of responses, some of them that polarized entire party systems, and pro and anti-austerity parties, etc., etc. But I think the crisis went beyond that. It has also triggered the increasing success of new parties, such as populist parties on the right, also populist parties on the left. And so it has led, on the one hand, to polarization, and on the other hand, to the rise of new parties. I think of one in particular in Greece, actually have explicit anti-democratic positions. There's a rising part, I think, in the population, and it has now gets now some kind of organizational grounds, and mobilizations take place of people that are actually unhappy with democracy, full stop, and are proposing to come back, in most cases, to more authoritarian regimes, which is extremely problematic.
The Euro crisis has led governments and also the EU institutions to want to make major reforms, to deal with the crisis, but also to prevent similar crises to happen in the future. So there was a resolve to make changes, political changes. Now, these political changes take a legal form invariably. So if you want to change reality, you have to adopt legal measures which will change behavior of participants. So the law has been used as an instrument. And that was in particular what I looked at in my contribution to this conference. I looked at the use not so much of the traditional instruments of EU law, directives and regulations, but also the use of more unusual legal instruments, namely international treaties under international law between some of the member states of the EU, in particular between the Eurozone states. So that's a sort of additional instrument, and I have defended the reasons, or explained, let's say, the reasons why this happened, why it seemed necessary to go beyond and outside the EU legal framework to make the necessary reforms.
I think that so far the representative system via the member state governments has worked relatively okay, but as we see in the financial crisis, there's a lot of strengthening of the supranational kind of institutional mechanisms, and I think this necessitates us to rethink also the representational mechanism. So the role of the EP in the institutions of fiscal governance, for example, should be really reconsidered.
There's a democratic deficit that's always existed, but the Eurozone crisis has made that more acute because we're now looking at policies such as taxing and spending, which are fundamental to national sovereignty. And I think the kind of the bottom line is there a constituency among Europeans as a whole to address the ideas of pooling resources at the European level and essentially sending money from one member state to another member state and ceding control over national budgets to other member states and the European institutions. That's an issue that politicians have failed to address so far. And that's really the bottom line that has to be answered if the Eurozone is going to exist in its current form. And I think for as long as politics remains national, as long as people feel and think that politics is on a national level and not on a European level, I think that poses fundamental challenges to the way the Eurozone is currently constructed and the current path that we appear to be on towards central control of budgets and also potentially common budgets and common resources at the European level. I think that unless that's anchored in kind of democratic consent, you're just storing up problems for future generations.
I think we have also to try to change the national parties in order to make their agenda more linked to the EU agenda. Then we have also important instrument of direct participation like the EU Citizen Initiative that I think could also be used by the EU political parties in order to root their action also in the single country. So I think there is a lot of things to do that could be done in order to strengthen the EU dimension of politics. The solution would not simply to come back to truly political national governments. that what also would help, and I think what will happen in Italy, but it's not enough. It's not a sufficient answer to this problem. The problem is to politicize the EU institution and to give them more legitimacy. That's the problem, and that's what we are trying to contribute. I think that the next European election, for example, people would take more attention, would pay more attention to their vote, knowing that that would influence who will be, for example, the Economic and Monetary Affairs Commissioner, which kind of policies would be implemented and dictated by Brussels. So maybe we are now under a transition and not only under a very deep democratic crisis.